Hey folks, I'm Raven. This is going to be a continuation of a series of guides I'm doing for some of my favourite League champions. Today's will be on Evelynn, Agony's Embrace. So what are some of the reasons you should be playing Evelynn in Season 11? Well, she's an incredibly powerful damage dealer, has massive solo carry potential, and has an extremely unique playstyle because of her passive. Now, again, League is a game about balance, so what are some of the negatives of playing her? Well, she's very squishy, terrible if you fall behind with her, and she's extremely punishable because of how squishy she is. But none of those downsides even come near stopping her being one of the most fun and powerful characters in the game. So let's get into the rest of the guide so I can show you why. Evelynn's passive, Demon Shade, comes with two halves. The first and less interesting half of that is that when she's below a set amount of health, she will heal for up to 50 health a second depending on her level. The second, and in my opinion more interesting half of Evelynn's passive is that after she hits level 6, she gains the ability to go invisible. This will activate after she's been out of combat for 4 seconds and goes into a 1.5 second cooldown if she's been hit by an enemy champion. Whilst invisible, Evelynn will have a ring around her, which is the display for how close an enemy champion has to get to her before she's revealed. If anything is causing Evelynn to be visible to enemies, a purple exclamation mark will appear above her head. Evelynn's invisibility will be removed by things such as towers, oracle lenses, and red wards, so if you're playing as her, you need to be careful about where you're positioning to make sure you're best optimizing this ability. Evelynn's Q, Hate Spike, is her bread and butter ability. She uses it whilst both farming in the jungle and fighting other players. It's a 4-stage ability that when first cast will fire in the target direction. The enemy hit by this first projectile will then take more damage from Evelynn's attacks or abilities for the next 3 hits. Upon the next 3 casts, you'll fire a line of spikes through the ground that can hit multiple targets but are fairly short ranged. This can be fired in very quick succession or spread out if needed. The hate spikes aren't controllable, but do have a bias towards moving towards the person you last hit, and if there's nobody in range that you've recently hit, they will just hit the nearest target possible. As I've already said, this is Evelynn's bread and butter ability used for everything from farming to fighting players, so get used to using it and get used to hitting that initial Q. Evelynn's next ability, Allure, her W, is a 2-part ability. Depending on when you trigger it will depend on the effects it has. So when you first place it on a champion, it will begin to tick up for up to 2.5 seconds. If you trigger it before the 2.5 seconds are up, the champion is then slowed by 65%, but not charmed. If you wait for the full 2.5 seconds, the champion is slowed and charmed, and they also have a 25% magic resistance penalty. If the target was a monster and not a champion, once you trigger the charm, it will last an extra 2 seconds and the monster will take up to 450% extra damage. The main skill component of this ability is knowing when you want to wait the 2.5 seconds to get a charm off and when you would rather just have the slow. If you need somebody to not escape or more magic penetration on somebody, so say somebody that's tanky, you may want to wait for the full charge. But if you are very fed or somebody has no chance of escaping or may escape if you wait 2.5 seconds, you'd be better just to go in without waiting for the full charm. It's very context reliant and just depends on the situation. It will just have to be your call at the time. Hey, whilst editing this I realised that I completely forgot to mention, when a charm has fully ticked on a hero, the hero that you charm will get an arrow that will point where you were stood when the charm finished ticking. So be careful about that, because if you are stood behind them, it doesn't reveal your position, but it tells them the direction you're in. So there are situations where it is dangerous to charm people. Evelynn's E, Whiplash, is once again a 2-part ability. With the unempowered version, Evelynn will whip the enemy with her tendrils, dealing maximum health damage for a set minimum of 25, applying on-hit effects and gaining movement speed for 2 seconds. Entering Demon Shade empowers Whiplash and causes the cooldown to be reset. Empowered Whiplash causes you to dash towards the enemy, dealing damage to any enemies in between you and them. So aside from the dash, it's the exact same as the regular version. A tip for using Whiplash would be to use it to trigger Allure, because it's a point and click ability as opposed to your hate spikes, which are not. Level 6 is a huge power spike for Evelynn, not only because her passive comes online, but also because she gains her ultimate, Last Caress. When you use Last Caress as Evelynn, you jump into the air becoming untargetable, dealing massive damage in an AoE in front of you. It's sort of like a semicircle shape if you want to imagine. You then blink backwards. The damage is increased by 140% against targets below 30% health. You will know when a target is below 30% health because they're marked with a cross. The cross does change skin to skin, but it's pretty self-explanatory. A big glowing cross will appear over the target that is below that much health. This ability has a lot of niche uses that better Evelynn players will abuse and newer ones won't. One of the more obvious ones, for example, would be resetting tower aggro. Because you become untargetable when you dive into the air, you can go under tower to dive a target, tank the tower for your team, and then R out when you're either going to die or the target is killable, and the tower will reset its target to shoot at a minion or a teammate, depending on what the tower would be shooting at normally in that situation. And that's only like one. There's a bunch of other tricks, from like easily stealing dragons and barons with it, and loads of other fun stuff, but there's too many to mention for this video alone. So to keep it short, let's move on to the items, runes, and level order now. So as Evelynn, there are two main level orders. There is the level order for when you are fighting against squishy enemies, and there is the level order for when they have a fairly tanky team. When you are against squishy enemies, you will level Q first, then E, then W, and then max Q, and then max E, and then max W. Also leveling R at levels 6, 11, and 16, but that goes without saying. Obviously, if the enemy team is more tanky, you'll need more magic penetration, and your W gives you that. So when you're up against a more tanky team, at level 1 you'll take Q, at level 2 you'll take E, then you'll take W, then at level 3 you'll take W like normal, but instead of maxing E second, you'll max W second. So the level order in terms of maxing skills will be Q, W, E against tankier teams, and obviously maxing your R when you have the opportunities to at 6, 11, and 16. But anyway, so that's the level orders for Evelynn against squishy and tanky enemies respectively. We're going to jump on over to the items part of the video now. In this part of the video, I will be sharing my opinions on which items I think are best for Evelynn in Season 9. When it comes to starting the game, I would say in 99% of situations you should be going Blue Smite and not Red. Red Smite is more brawlery and it's just not exactly what Eve needs, whereas Blue Smite fits that a lot better. And then obviously refillables. Out of the mythic items, I've seen 2 used and I always go Night Harvester personally. I've just included Hextech Rocket Belt because I've seen people make builds with it and I can see more and more people are starting to use it. It's just as of this video, it isn't that big and I personally do not like it. But I'm including it just to be fair. As Evelynn, you should almost always be taking Dark Seal, like before level 6. Like on level 6 latest you should be picking up a Dark Seal, unless you've fallen behind massively by level 6. If somehow you've completely fallen behind by level 6, you've been ganked repeatedly, not ganked, you've been invaded repeatedly, then maybe don't, because you're going to need your gold and you're going to need to farm back up. But if you haven't, and even if you're on 000 at level 6, then pick up a Dark Seal and get out there on the map, because all it takes is 3-4 kills and then you're suddenly snowballing, and if you get fed enough, go for that Medjai's. Be aware it's a much bigger risk. If you fuck up with a Dark Seal, you're losing 350 gold. If you fuck up with a Medjai's, you're losing 1,600. The difference there is huge. So be aware that you're taking a much bigger risk once you upgrade to the Medjai's, and only do it if you are confident enough in your own skill and how fed you are to not die. Because it literally takes 2 to 3 deaths to lose all stacks in a Medjai's. So be careful if you're going to upgrade. I would if you think you can, but don't if you're going to fuck it up or if you're still learning Evelynn, because it will bite you in the arse. In terms of like legendary items that you should be buying, Lichbane's quite good. Rabadon's makes a really good 3rd or 4th item. Never buy it 1st or 2nd. 3rd or 4th, really solid choice. Void Staff, always great, lots of magic penetration, fair amount of ability power, and very cheap this season. The new items definitely knocked it. They got rid of certain items and like buffed up others, and I'd say this came out up pretty high up there in terms of how well it's done. It's cheap and it has the magic penetration that you buy it for. In terms of boots, never anything but sorcerer's shoes. It's just that simple. As a final item, generally you can go most items as a final item that are AP, but Banshee's Veil is a good defense item if you're up against, say, a Vigor that's super fed, a Teemo that's super, anyone that's going to be a pain in the arse, that's got some form of CC, that's an ability that's going to slow you, lock you down, or blow you up. Going Banshee's Veil is a decent option there. Zhong's Hourglass is really good against stuff like a Zed or a fairly heavy CC team or anything like that where you need a little bit more survivability towards the end. I always say don't pick Evelynn into a hard CC team, but if you first pick, or if you're one-tricking, you're going to pick her anyway. So in that situation, going Quicksilver Sash makes sense. A tip for this, if you get knocked up, like with a Malphite ult or something, and you want to get out of the knock-up, use Quicksilver Sash and then Flash, and you will break free of the knock-up. Just using Quicksilver Sash on its own doesn't knock you out of it. And then obviously you've got Morellonomicon for when you need Grievous Wounds. They've got a Warwick, they've got a Darius, that type of character. You could argue that you shouldn't be building the full item and you'd be better just building an Oblivion Orb and then deciding where you need to go from there. But that's that. The reason I've only put 5 items in this final build sort of list is because, as I always say, massively context reliant. I cannot tell you how to build every game because every game requires different builds. So this is a rough idea of what you should be building, but in some games you might get fed enough to where you want to build a Rabadon's there. You may not want to build a Void Staff at all because they're all very squishy and haven't built a single piece of magic resistance. You may get massively behind, in which case you won't want a Medjay's and you may want to delay your Rabadons. It just depends on the game. But this is a pretty safe build for most, assuming you are getting fed with the Medjay's. If not, stick with the Dark Seal and swap it out later on for something else. But yeah, that's the end of the items part of the video. So in this part of the video, I'll be talking about what, in my opinion, are the best runes for Evelynn in Season 11. Being that Evelynn is a burst assassin, you will always go Electrocute. It just works best with her damage type. There's no other keystone that works as well with her. Then Evelynn's passive is obviously Stealth, so taking a rune that will then buff you when you come out of Stealth, or a Dash, which would be her E. Like, this rune is perfect for Evelynn, so you will always take sudden impact. Then there's Eyebow Collection. Evelynn is an assassin, so you will be wanting to get fed. You're also a jungler, so you'll be roaming around getting more assists and more kills, so it just makes sense to take that. And then Relentless Hunter, because movement speed is king as Evelynn. This will almost never change. You will almost always go Domination as Evelynn. It is just that simple. The keystones that can change, the runes that can change, however, are your secondary ones, which would be Sorcery or Inspiration. Personally, I prefer Inspiration, but I'll run over the Sorcery ones quickly for those of you that want those. If you are going Sorcery, you will always ignore the top tree and either go Transcendence or Absolute Focus, and then either Water Walking or Gathering Storm. I prefer Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm is obviously better if you plan on scaling. Water Walking is better if you don't have a team that wants to scale. Transcendence is a pretty good all-round ability. I just think Absolute Focus has much better synergy with your passive as Evelynn. Obviously you will heal up health, and then you will always be above that 70%, or will almost always be above that 70% health to get the extra damage. But the runes I prefer are Inspiration. I will always take Boots and then either Futures Market or Cosmic Insight. Futures Market is a great rune. You're less punished for being forced to back early, which can happen as Evelynn because you're so easily bullied out early game. You may need to back early sometimes, so Futures Market is okay for that. Personally though, Cosmic Insight is better in Season 11 in my opinion, just because Smite is so important right now as a jungler in terms of getting it off as quickly as possible and as often as possible to get those first 5 smites out. This will mean that's on cooldown more often, so you'll be able to get the scuttles you need, steal the buffs, steal the dragons, and all these other things that you can do so much easier with smite. And not only that, but obviously that means early game you're gonna have your empowered smite sooner, so you'll be able to blue smite people, or if you've went red smite people sooner, which is great as Evelynn, especially if you have taken blue smite, because that can help you escape if you're invaded. So yeah, in my opinion, these are the perfect runes for Evelynn. Some people would say go sorcerers, some people would say go futures market, but in my opinion, these are the best runes for Evelynn. The minor keystones here, they are always the same. You will always take the 2 adaptive and 1 armor, unless you are up against a team of 5 AP heroes, in which case then you take a magic resistance rune instead of armor. But in 99% of situations, these are the perfect runes for Evelynn. So because this video has already run on past the 15-minute mark, I'm going to try and run through these really quickly. As Evelynn, in most games until 6 you are going to hard farm. You are just going to focus on quickly farming up to 6 as quickly as possible. If you would normally hit level 6 as a jungler at say 8 minutes, Evelynn you want to be hitting it at 7. Evelynn is half a hero until she hits level 6. So you need to get there as soon as possible. That should be your main focus of the early game. If that means you do not gank at all, that is completely okay. Your lanes should be able to survive a 1v1 for the first 5 minutes of the game. If they can't, they may blame you, and trust me, at lower elos they will blame you, but that isn't your fault. If your laners cannot survive for 10 minutes without you, that's on them, not on you. Don't worry about it. Focus on getting to level 6 early game. Some tips would be look out for invades. You can see in the background video I got invaded, so I just rotated and counter invaded them, and then also took their Gronk to actually put me ahead of them slightly. And then I rotated into a full clear and then ganked and then reset and cleared again, so I hit 6. It's a pretty simple start. But yeah, that aside, that should be the video, folks. This has been my second attempt at a guide, so yet again, I don't expect it to be perfect by any means, and if you have any tips for improvement, or if I've said something that's wrong, feel free to point it out in the comments. Let me know, because this is all about me learning and improving, and like a big part of me doing this guide series is me trying to hit a 15-minute video with some style of editing, because until I started this channel, I had no idea how to edit either. This is all just for me to learn and figure this out. So any feedback, assuming constructive, is completely welcome. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, it's been fun. See you next time.